Did you know that a once mighty superpower is currently witnessing a mass exodus of its own citizens, so extreme it looks like a scene from a 1920s disaster movie? Witness the total collapse of an empire and hit that like button now to help us expose this truth today. More than 690,000 people have packed their bags and surrendered their lives in the United Kingdom, fleeing a sinking ship in numbers we haven't seen in a century. It is a bitter, heartbreaking reality. Among those escaping are over 100,000 young intellectuals, elite doctors, and high-level engineers who are clutching one-way tickets, vowing never to return to their homeland. What is truly happening to the Titan that once dominated a quarter of the entire planet? The traumatic truth is that the British dream, which used to be a beacon for the whole world, has mutated into a living, breathing nightmare. We are looking at a place where the simple act of paying rent consumes a staggering 60% of your soul's energy and income. Where neighborhoods exist where a man's life expectancy hits a shocking low of 50 years, and where tens of thousands of innocent children are forced to sit in classrooms with stomachs that are completely empty. Life in the 10 major hubs of the nation is spiraling into a state of total poverty and clinical exhaustion. The youth are no longer choosing to build a future there. They are fleeing to find a true opportunity to actually live. It is time to wake up from the rosy, postcard fantasy and face the trauma. Buckle up as we join forces to uncover the 10 bleeding scars that are making daily life in the United Kingdom a literal impossibility. Forget those glamorous, cinematic promotional films you see of London on social media. The reality is that London is no longer a sanctuary for its people. It has transformed into a brutal battlefield for class cleansing through the sheer violence of the cost of living. It is a silent cleansing, a hidden war, but it is powerful enough to push hundreds of thousands of residents onto the streets. If you venture into the eastern districts like Newham, you will see the housing price trap crushing the very resilience of the core workforce. A tiny, one-bedroom apartment in Zone 2 currently demands a rent of £2,400 every single month. This figure is a financial addiction that consumes more than 60% of a working family's entire income. You work your fingers to the bone all month just to pay for 4 grey walls. So what is left for the basics of human life? What about food, heating, or just living? This has triggered a truly shocking statistic that feels like an emergency. In just 18 months, more than 347,000 people have been forced to flee Greater London. This is not a choice. It is an economic forced evacuation. The paradox is almost cinematic in its cruelty. A series of luxury apartment towers continue to rise into the sky, but they are not meant to be lived in by humans. They serve as cloud banks, where the global ultra-rich hide and speculate their assets. Tens of thousands of these completed apartments sit completely empty, like ghost towers. Ironically, right beneath these glass monuments to greed are the workers who have fallen into the trap of homelessness. The people who save your life every day, the NHS doctors, the teachers, and the police officers are being squeezed, discarded, and pushed away from the heart of the city. The market has been distorted to the point where the right to have a roof over one's head has turned from a basic human need into a high-stakes financial privilege. This process doesn't just strip away the opportunity to live, it tears apart the very cultural identity and traditional sense of community connection. Unlike the gruesome, visible collapse of form seen in some American cities, London still wears a magnificent, shiny facade. But inside, it has been structurally depleted. This city is so successful that it exports the very workforce that creates its value. Looking at this reality, do you think London is truly developing as a centre of progress? Or is it just a financial speculation machine disguised as real estate? Can a capital still be called a centre of civilization when the people who keep it running every day cannot afford to pay rent for a small room? If London drives people away with its expensive money trap, then on the northern coast, another city is destroying its residents with the trauma of utter abandonment. Welcome to Blackpool, the graveyard of a generation. Leave the expensive London lights behind and step onto the cold northern coast. Blackpool was once the pride of seaside tourism, a cinematic escape for the working class throughout the 20th century. But now, that once glorious symbol has faded into a grey shadow of itself. It has made way for a true generation's graveyard. The decline of domestic tourism, combined with poor management, has condensed all the worst social pathology indicators of England into this one town. Can you actually believe this? The healthy life expectancy of men in Blackpool has dropped to a shocking 50.9 years. That is more than a decade lower than the national average. It means men here spend up to 1/3 of their remaining lives just struggling with chronic illnesses, disabilities, and deep psychological trauma. Moreover, the overdose mortality rate here is a horrifying 8 times the national average. While violent crime continues to rise steadily by 12% each year, what has turned a paradise resort into a crumbling wasteland of despair? The answer lies in a distorted, broken operational mechanism. When the tourism industry collapsed, hundreds of family-run bed and breakfasts, part of the town, went bankrupt. They immediately transformed into illegal, cheap lodging houses known as HMOs. Bitterly, authorities from other localities across England take advantage of this by relocating ex-convicts and homeless people here just to clean up their own areas. Blackpool has been turned into a national social dumping ground. The healthcare and welfare infrastructure immediately collapsed under the weight. The rate of children being placed into the social care system surged to 223 per 10,000 children, the worst national record ever recorded. The concept of collapse from despair is more evident here than ever. People here do not fade away due to conflict like in a movie. They end their lives in silence, trapped in a toxic spiral that imprisons generation after generation. Have you ever wondered how a country that was once a pioneer in public healthcare can accept its citizens losing the ability to live healthfully by the age of 50? Is the governance system actually addressing the crisis, or are they simply gathering the unfortunate lives into a secluded corner by the seaside to easily forget them? Leaving the graveyard of Blackpool's coastline, the next collapse we witness does not come from social evils, but from the brutal financial heart attack of an industrial giant. Let's go to Birmingham. Welcome to Birmingham, the second largest city in England, once proud to be the cradle of the Industrial Revolution and dubbed the workshop of the world. But that picture of cinematic prosperity has completely shattered into a million pieces. The decisive blow was the City Council's official declaration of substantive bankruptcy under Section 114. This was a decision like a bucket of ice-cold water that completely shatters public trust. In a post-Brexit world, manufacturing facilities, the very backbone of the economy that supports hundreds of thousands of families, are closing one after another. To patch the enormous, bleeding budget deficit, local authorities chose the simplest and most painful way: tightening the belt and drastically cutting public services. Streetlights are turned off, leaving neighbourhoods in darkness. Garbage piles up without anyone collecting it, and community centres are closed and silent. How severe are the consequences for the people living there? In the impoverished areas of Birmingham, the rate of children living in suffocating, grinding poverty has skyrocketed to an astonishing 61.7%. It is a childhood of deprivation. Not stopping there, the waiting time for ambulances at local NHS hospitals has increased by up to 40%. Many acute cases have deteriorated, with people even taking their last breath right in the ambulance before they can even reach a doctor. Unlike in the United States, where people are accustomed to the cinematic risks of private healthcare, the people of England are falling into a state of desperate, Depression due to the collapse of the social contract known as the NHS. Seeing no future in their own homeland, the young, skilled workforce is creating a massive wave of brain drain. Their only option at this moment is to buy a one-way ticket to migrate to the space and opportunity of Australia, New Zealand, or the United States. The workshop of the world can no longer even print a minimal future for the younger generation. When the second largest city of a major nation declares bankruptcy, do you think it is simply the weakness of the local management? Or is it a signal of a systemic, nationwide collapse? Can a country continue to call itself a superpower when its best and brightest young talents are just waiting for the opportunity to escape across the ocean? Goodbye to the piles of debt in Birmingham. Let's visit the historic port city of Liverpool, where a deep and brutal wound is being endured. This is the complete collapse of housing and social welfare development policies. Years of poor governance and a series of political scandals have completely eroded the remaining trust of the people. How bad is the planning situation in Liverpool right now? This city is severely lacking 232,759 homes just to meet the minimum requirement for its residents. But the real tragedy, the part that feels like a cruel joke, lies in the next number. More than 12,000 families are languishing on the waiting list for social housing. Yet throughout the entire fiscal year, the city government has only completed exactly 5 houses. That's right, you heard it correctly. Just 5 houses for 12,000 waiting families. It is a number that is nothing short of a traumatic insult to the fate of the poor. The freeze on the supply of social housing immediately drove private rental prices up to unreasonable, soul-crushing levels. Thousands of families are trapped in cramped, mouldy boarding houses that do not meet even the most basic minimum safety standards. Not stopping there, the housing crisis indirectly triggered another collapse. Key hospitals in Liverpool continuously sound the alarm due to a severe shortage of doctors and nurses. It's simple. How can you retain a good doctor when their salary can't even cover the high cost of living in a crumbling city? A toxic spiral forms, healthcare declines, quality of life hits rock bottom, and knowledge flees. Liverpool is turning itself into a paralyzed city where life is imprisoned in endless waiting lists. Crossing the northern border into Scotland, we will see the housing crisis no longer confined to empty planning numbers, but officially turned into a humanitarian emergency. Welcome to Glasgow. Leaving behind the endless waiting lists in Liverpool, we cross the northern border to Scotland. In Glasgow, the housing crisis is no longer just a set of statistics on a report page. It has officially turned into a humanitarian emergency, as the city has issued a full urban emergency declaration. The local welfare system has completely collapsed, utterly unable to accommodate and manage the rapidly increasing number of homeless people appearing each day. Each year, Glasgow records over 16,000 applications for emergency assistance from those who literally have no roof over their heads. The temporary accommodations, which are mainly dilapidated and mouldy hotels, are in a state of severe, suffocating overcrowding. Thousands of families with young children have to live cramped for months in these rooms, lacking both cooking facilities and basic sanitation. This harsh reality has created a painful statistic. Glasgow has the highest rate of homeless people collapsing across all of Scotland. The medical community has long used the term Glasgow effect to refer to this phenomenon of psychological trauma and poverty being passed down through the bloodline like a hereditary disease. Children born in temporary housing continuously suffer from chronic respiratory diseases and a total loss of concentration. Bitterer still, 42% of students in Glasgow have to rely entirely on free school meals just to survive the day. When their stomachs are not warm enough, how can they dream of knowledge or advancement? The trap of low income, disease, and vice keeps repeating from generation to generation like a predetermined prison sentence. Glasgow is paying a heavy price for the collapse of the welfare model, where nearly half of the children go to school just to wait for a free meal. Where will the future of this land be in 20 years? In your opinion, is the Glasgow effect a hereditary disease of poverty or a brutal scar created by the failure of public policy? Please share your opinion and write in the comments section. Leaving behind the cramped tenements of Glasgow, we return to the north of England to witness another tragedy. Middlesbrough and Stoke-on-Trent are typical victims of a sudden de-industrialisation process that completely lacks any social protection mechanisms. In Middlesbrough, the closure and demise of the strategic steel industry dealt a fatal blow, completely wiping out the local economy. It's a painfully high figure. Nearly one-third, or about 29.2% to 31% of the working-age population here, have fallen into a state of complete economic inactivity. Thousands of men who had dedicated their entire lives to steel foundries have fallen into permanent unemployment, leading to a chain reaction collapse of the entire service sector. The family structure and traditional labour status were shattered, creating a widespread psychological crisis and a sense of post-industrial depression. Meanwhile, in Stoke-on-Trent, the historic ceramics capital, the decline in production given way to an explosion of vice and conflict. Shocking figures show that the crime rate in Stoke-on-Trent has reached alarming levels. 100 offences per 1,000 residents, which is 47% higher than the regional average. Thousands of shops on the high street have to close permanently due to theft, vandalism, and depleted purchasing power. A security gap has emerged as police forces continue to face budget cuts, leaving the streets feeling like a lawless movie set. Criminal gangs quickly rose to fill the power vacuum, turning many residential areas into unstable, dangerous territories. Young people faced a risk of insecurity right in their own homes, without any opportunity for legal employment. Both cities are silently suffering as faith in the law and the future is being extinguished. What is more dangerous? A factory closing down and taking away livelihoods, or the government withdrawing security forces and causing the streets to fall into instability? Can a society sustain itself when nearly one-third of the workforce is completely excluded from the economic flow without any way out? If Middlesbrough or Stoke-on-Trent bear the pain of industrial decline, then Kingston upon Hull represents another bitter model. A poverty island abandoned by national infrastructure. The decline of Hull is not only due to internal factors, but also because of its complete geographical and economic isolation. Located on the edge of northeast Yorkshire, Hull is severed from strategic transport networks and major economic corridors. Technology and modern service corporations completely overlook Hull when searching for investment locations. The painful reality is that more than 90% of neighbourhoods in Hull are classified as having a standard of living below the national average, with many areas even falling into the bottom 2% of the poorest in England. The severe lack of job opportunities has triggered a large-scale wave of immigration. Thousands of middle-class families with decent incomes and professional qualifications choose to leave Hull each year. This wave of exodus deprives the local government of important tax revenue, causing the city's budget to fall into a state of depletion with no funds left for reinvestment in healthcare and infrastructure. Unlike the flexibility of moving between states for Americans, the poor in Hull are trapped in a geographical prison on an island nation. The high cost of transportation and exorbitant housing prices in other regions prevent them from migrating in search of new opportunities. Hull is gradually becoming a public poverty trap, imprisoning the most vulnerable people who simply cannot afford to leave. When the middle class packs their bags and leaves, who will be left to bear the operational costs of a dying city? Is this infrastructural isolation an oversight in planning, or a deliberate strategy to abandon areas that no longer hold commercial value. Leaving behind isolated islands like Hull, we arrive at Bradford, a city with one of the youngest populations in England, but which is sinking deeper into the trap of poverty and stagnation. Bradford is a bitter testament to the comprehensive failure of the mainstream education and skills training system. A staggering figure: up to 119 neighbourhoods in Bradford are classified as being in a state of severe skills poverty. The young workforce here completely fails to meet the minimum requirements of the modern digital and financial job market. As a result, instead of developing, Bradford is exporting its own future, with up to 24,472 young people deciding to pack their bags and leave the city each year. Those with any ability immediately flee to other cities or abroad, leaving behind an unhirable workforce. The cycle of unemployment directly attacks the younger generation that remains trapped. Heartbreaking statistics show that over 40,000 children in Bradford are facing hunger and malnutrition. Schools are forced to take on the role of charity houses, sidelining education just to distribute emergency food. The disruption of education has turned Bradford into a directionless land, losing its most valuable resources, the energy and intellect of its youth. How can a city develop when the only product its education system exports is its own youth? Are we training the future generation to master the digital economy? Or are we letting them become victims of backwardness? Share your perspective in the comments section. And when young people are pushed out of Bradford or London, they flood into the surrounding satellite towns, creating the next seismic shift of trauma. Luton and Peterborough are the two representatives most negatively affected by the spillover effect of rising prices and the influx of people relocating from London. This mechanical population growth is happening at a breakneck speed, but it is not accompanied by any corresponding economic development. In Peterborough, a terrifying price-wage gap trap has emerged. House prices have skyrocketed by 103%, while the average weekly wage has only increased by a mere 19%. This rupture completely shatters the dream of home ownership for local residents, pushing them into a fiercely competitive and predatory private rental market. Meanwhile, in Luton, the population explosion has completely overwhelmed public infrastructure. Schools are overcrowded, and clinics have stopped accepting patients. Even more shocking, nearly 10% of households, around 20,000 people in Luton, have fallen into absolute energy poverty, unable to afford the most basic needs. The harsh concept of heat or eat has become a daily survival reality. When the freezing winter arrives, thousands of families are forced to turn off their heating systems, accepting to live in damp, cold houses just to have enough money to buy meals from day to day. Luton and Peterborough are harsh, cinematic examples of how uncontrolled population growth can completely break the quality of human life. The final stop takes us to Derry City and Strabane and Jaywick, two places that exemplify the highest level of neglect by the central governance system. Derry, Northern Ireland, has been turned into a forgotten geopolitical buffer zone post-Brexit. The establishment of trade barriers and the disruption of connections have completely devastated the local economy. Official data records Derry as the poorest region on the UK map, with 45.4% of its area at the bottom tier of all development indices. It has become a geographical prison with no opportunities, cut off from investment flows. Meanwhile, in Jaywick, on the Essex coast, the infrastructure depletion, combined with ecological traps, has turned this place into one of the most impoverished towns in England. Residents have to live in dilapidated wooden houses from the 1930s, completely without central heating. More painfully, Jaywick has only one road in and out, no train station, and no bus service, and it is facing the risk of sinking 3 meters underwater due to climate change. Every time the tide rises, the entire residential area is completely isolated. The value of real estate plummets to zero, permanently imprisoning the poor residents in total despair. Derry and Jaywick are symbols of the system's impotence and indifference toward the most vulnerable. When a land is pushed to the bottom of development indices and faces the risk of sinking beneath the sea, where is the government? Is it true that the cost of major geopolitical decisions is always borne by the most vulnerable people in the border regions? We have together traversed 10 bleeding scars spread across the United Kingdom, from the rent-controlled apartments pushing people onto the streets in London and the disappearance of hope in the graveyard of Blackpool, to the completely isolated islands like Jaywick or Derry. The record number of nearly 700,000 people leaving the country each year, including over 100,000 intellectuals and young people, is not just a soulless statistic. That is the most brutal wake-up call for a development model that is reaching its absolute limits of existence. A prosperous nation cannot be measured by skyscrapers that shelter streams of super-rich capital. While the public healthcare system collapses, social housing is frozen, and children go to school just to wait for a free meal to get by. When the young, the lifeblood and future of the nation, choose to buy one-way tickets to leave, that is when the social contract has completely broken down. Is this wave of mass migration just a temporary downturn in the economic cycle? Or is it the definitive end of the prosperous era for the United Kingdom? Have you ever seen anything like this? Would you stay or would you flee? Please share your opinion in the comment section below. If you find this video provides you with a deep and authentic perspective on society, don't hesitate to like and share to spread this content to more people. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next in-depth analysis episodes about the social issues that few dare to mention. Please note the content in this analysis is compiled and cross-referenced from social analysis reports, publicly available data from the Office for National Statistics, and city government reports up to 2025. All evaluations, comments, and opinions aim to provide a multifaceted perspective for community discussion, and are not intended to personally attack individuals or organizations, or to cause public confusion. This content does not constitute investment advice, residency advice, or legal consultation. Viewers are encouraged to independently verify information from official sources before making personal decisions.